ask you to raise a couple of, can I raise a couple of points?
Yeah.
We seem to be living in a time when people who call themselves leftists always take the given conditions and say, how are we going to work within them? For example, in the 1960s, among many people who call themselves anarchists, or whatever that word means anymore, they talked about decentralization and everything like that, which was physical. Now, everybody is trying to adapt to what exists and saying, how can you improve the present capitalist system? And I have to use the word capitalist, not just market economy, for reasons of my own. Because I think capitalism, Marx had only a kind of bare understanding and a brilliant understanding of where capitalist accumulation, commodity production was going. But he was writing in the 1860s. Now, I really begin to see capitalism truly, I don't believe it's decaying, I think it's maturing. You know, we used to say in the 30s and in the 40s, decaying capitalism, or moribund, dying capitalism. On the contrary, capitalism is growing and growing and growing. And it is capitalism, not just the market economy. But that's my point of view, and we can discuss that perhaps in one way or another. The thing that, first of all, disquiets me, after having, for example, read a person whom I like very much, Roy Morrison, and having looked over and being asked to write a blurb to the book, was that ecological democracy is an adaptation to capitalism, and we're sort of going to do it, you know what I mean, bit by bit. We'll compete with Grand Union by establishing co-ops and whatever you have. Well, all the co-ops, by the way, are undergoing degeneration, and Mondragon is changing radically, so that if I read the book that I endorsed, that he wrote years ago, I would feel that I couldn't put that an endorsement anymore, since it's now becoming more and more of a capitalist enterprise. And that is Mondragon. That is not, the local head shop or the local food co-op or the local organic food place. What is it called again? Yeah, all right, now, no, I never said you disagreed. I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to make a comment. The question of when capitalism really begins to mature, which Marx in some ways foresaw, but did not really fully foresee, really begins after the Second World War. Well, we did not realize how pre-capitalist we were by comparison with what happened after 1950, to be more precise. In fact, it was then that the peasantry was wiped out in France, which for 150 years formed the basis, you know what I mean, for the whole French economy. I mean, it really shaped the whole French economy because of the kind of internal market it produced. I don't want to go into that. I've had a lot to do with what I'm writing right now. The thing is, one, people tend to take the existing situation and they can't find any other alternative but working within it, you know what I mean, as though by working within it they can reshape it. I've just recently had a correspondence with the Social Democrat who's discovered confederal municipalism, and Edward Bernstein, you know what I mean, who's the revisionist of the Social Democrats in the Second International before the First World War. That's number one that I would like to just make a point of, if I may, in connection with what you have to say.
Yeah,
the second thing is confederalism, confederal economics. Now, I just will finish that for a moment. What do you exactly, how do you envision confederal control of the economy? I agree with you that there has to be confederation. I do not believe in self-sufficiency. The Unabomber has it, and looking at him, I think I've got a perfect example of self-sufficiency, you know what I'm saying? And there are a few other people out in Montana, you know, where I think self-sufficient people may want to migrate. But leaving that alone, with the Unabomber and his complete self-sufficiency, up to the point where he makes his own nails, until he has to get a job every so often to make a trip and send off a bomb. Leaving that part aside, and the need to buy dynamite, he hasn't learned how to do that yet without buying it. And watching Kirkpatrick Sale working his Electric II typewriter as though he's gone back to the Paleolithic by doing so, without somebody telling him, you know, if I just pull out the plug, your typewriter's not going to work, and it depends upon this Niagara Falls and the huge dams and everything else that this self-sufficiency and simplistic Luddite living is going to provide. The thing that I wanted to get to as a question now is, how do you describe confederal control of the economy. Because this raises a real question of how that democracy is actually going to work. A confederal structure will necessarily have to be a council. It will have to be a council. Otherwise, it's not a confederal structure. You see, there's one difference between an assembly and a confederal structure. Now, if you're going to have a council, will that council have policy-making decisions? How will it make decisions for the economy? Because for the rest, I believe you accept the idea of a democracy based more or less approximating the Greek ecclesia or assembly. And you believe in a face-to-face democracy, a direct democracy, which is the only meaning democracy has. But at the council level, democracy now becomes more Republican. I mean this with a small r, I don't mean with just the Republican Party. How would that council actually work, although you must do it on the confederal level? There will be no place, with the possible exception of Samoa, or maybe not even Samoa, or Tahiti, or something like that, which can live, you know what I mean, in sunshine, naked, and just let coconuts drop down from the palm trees. Okay, there I see perfect self-sufficiency if you don't want a typewriter. But that's another question. All right? How would that work? How do you envision it?
Yeah. Let's come to the first point first, about capitalism with respect to market economy. I agree that what we face today is the vast expansion of capitalism. But
just talk a little louder because I'm hard.
yeah, I agree that what we face today is the vast expansion of capitalism, but what I tried to do was to make for systematic reasons, a distinction between the market economy and capitalism. Because today, especially today, we have many people who support socialist market. And in fact, as I said, in the countries like China, Vietnam, etc., they have at the moment, they say they have market economy, socialist markets. Sorry. They have socialist markets. So the question is that today it's not anymore theoretically possible as it used to be in the past, the socialist market economy. Today, many people say that we can combine a social ownership of the means of production with the market. And that's why I think it is important to talk generally about the market economy, which covers also this case. That's why I made a distinction. But I agree that in case you have private property relations and market economy, and of course this is capitalism. But I wanted to cover a broader thing. I wanted to cover also the case of socialist market, or socialist in quotation marks. Okay. Now the second question about how we can envisage a confederal economy and how it would work. Of course, as I said, this is what I try to do in the model in my book, which would take time tonight to discuss the details. But in general terms, what I could say is that, first of all, you can introduce various kinds of safety valves. That is, the community assemblies elect delegates which are recallable, and therefore they have just to implement particular decisions of the community assemblies. Secondly, and this is interesting, there is a growing literature at the moment which shows that there are technological means of having an electronic democracy at the level of a confederation. You can have now an assembly, in other words, working through electronic means. Actually now there is a growing literature about this, which I think is very interesting. It shows that, in other words, you can have at various places community assemblies discussing and deciding on various issues, and these connected through an electronic network at the same time.
Okay, I understand. I agree with that approach. You bring it back to the community and then back through you negotiate through the assemblies. Yeah. In other words, that is confederalism.
Yeah.
It would merely be administrative. It would not be policy.
Yeah, of course.
And that's a big distinction, a very important one that is not understood.